Right, we're going to think about our introduction to this balanced discussion. Now, we have to introduce any bit of writing that we do, and we're going to need an opening paragraph. Now, a paragraph is just a collection of sentences that are grouped together to discuss one idea. Okay, we've got to introduce it in a clear, concise, and interesting way. Now, concise means brief, so we don't want to be waffly. We want to get straight to the point. We're going to be writing it in the third person. So we're going to use pronouns like he, she, it, or they. I've already started here by popping down my title, and as you can see, it is a question, so it needs to have the correct punctuation at the end of it. So, is it right to kill animals? Now, I'm going to let you inside my writer's brain while I write my introduction. Okay, so I'm thinking it's got to be clear, it's got to be concise, it's got to be interesting, but I'm not going to give away any of my points that I've planned yet. Okay, so I'm going to start with a general opening. So for many years, comma, I'm thinking about, I want to say that people have been debating or discussing whether it's right to kill animals or not for a long time. So I've gone for many years, comma, that's my adverbial. People have been debating whether it is ever right to kill animals. And that is my opening sentence, okay? I've used the word debating. There's some debating language in there. Now what I want to say is, I want to say that some people think yes, some people agree that it's okay, and some people think no, it's not okay to kill animals. But I'm not going to tell them why at the moment. I'm just going to give them an overview. Okay, so I'm not going to go into any detail. That's going to come in my other paragraphs, for my paragraphs for killing animals and my paragraph against killing animals. I need to think about using some technical vocabulary and some formal language here. Okay, so I've started with some argue that destroying animals is vital for human health. So that's why, yes, we should. It's vital for our human health. And now I'm going to say why we shouldn't. While others passionately. Now, I've decided to use the word passionately here because it's emotive. It shows my reader that people are passionate about this debate about killing animals or not. I've also used the word innocent as an emotive language, while others passionately believe that killing innocent animals, now I want to say is unnecessary. I can see here that I've written the word in. I'm going to have to go back and change that. Now, unnecessary, I'm not sure if I've spelt that right, so I'm going to just put a little SP there, and I'm going to get my dictionary out and I'm going to check it at the end. And then I'm just going to need one final sentence which tells my reader, which pushes my reader through the text, and that tells them that this text is going to consider both sides of the discussion. It's going to consider both sides. And I'm going to give you some reasons why people think it's okay with some evidence, and some reasons why it's not with some evidence. So this text will consider both sides of the important. I was going to write of the important. Well, the doesn't work, so I've crossed it out and wrote this. This text will consider both sides of this important and emotive. It is emotion. It's an emotional issue. So that is my first opening paragraph. I have written 4 sentences. One to introduce what the argument's about, one for, one for against, and then I've told my reader what this text is going to tell them. It's going to consider both sides. Okay? So this is my opening. This is my introducing the argument sentence. And then this is my explaining what I'm going to be doing in this text. Have a go. We've written our introduction. We've got all our planning. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to write the argument. So we've pushed our reader through the introduction and we're at the point of the argument. Now we need to write two parts here. We need to write the argument for killing animals. We agree with that. And then the argument against killing animals, why we don't think that we should. Remember, it's got to be balanced. So we can't have more evidence for one of those than the other. I've also got up here some of the word bank that might help me. And I've decided that I'm going to start with this many people believe, but I'm changing many to some. I've also got some debate language up there so I can draw upon that should I need it. So I'm thinking about the for. So some people think that destroying animals, and if I think back to my plan, I put that, we talked about food. I had food on my plan, and meat and fish are a really important source of protein. So I want to get that through to my reader. Okay, without this important protein, our bodies aren't going to be healthy. We won't have a balanced diet, and we won't grow and repair. That's what protein's for. So some people believe, comma, because that's my fronted adverbial conjunction part, that destroying, so I've swapped the word killing for destroying here. I don't want to use the word killing or kill too much. So some people believe that destroying animals for food is an essential part of the food chain. So I'm drawing upon my science knowledge here as well. I know that food chains, there are predators and there are prey, and we need meat to live and fish to live. So it's an essential part of the human food chain. I've gone on to say then that meat and fish, that they provide the necessary protein, but it's not all meat. So it's meat that is not processed, that hasn't had anything added to it, no additives or preservatives. So we would call that unprocessed. So unprocessed meat and fish provide the necessary protein required for a healthy diet, really. And I'm going to write to maintain, because maintain is quite a technical word. Makes me sound like I'm an expert. It's nice formal language. To maintain a healthy diet. And again, diet is a technical word. All right. So that's one reason why. Now, the other reason that I wanted to talk about, and I can use any of these conjunctions here to add more information, is that actually we sometimes have to use animals to help test medicines and vaccinations, and scientists use them in laboratories to test that the medicines and the medications that they're going to give to humans are safe. So this is my next point. So I've chosen, in addition to add some more detail. I'm using some technical language as well. I want people not to know that this is just what I think, but scientists, this is scientific. We need this as a scientific need. So in addition to this, scientists that are developing new vaccines and medication. So these are things that help keep us well and healthy and keep us safe. So as a baby, you would have been vaccinated against measles, mumps and rubella, which are some nasty diseases, and they would have had to develop those vaccines to make sure that they were safe. So in addition to this, scientists that are developing new vaccines and medication need to ensure I was going to write the safe, but that doesn't sound right. So need to ensure that they are safe, I think, would be better. Oh no, that these are safe, because there's vaccines and medications. That these are safe for human... handwriting, Mrs. Lancaster, come on. For humans to use. Okay, we wouldn't want to put anything that's dangerous into a human. We've got to test it out first. Okay. I'm going to put a reason why. So therefore, animals are used. for testing. Okay. So I've added another point. New vaccines and medications to ensure that they're safe for humans and animals are used for testing. Okay, so these are the ways that I've started my sentences. Some people believe, in addition to this, I've also got a therefore in. So my conjunctions, my adverbials. I'm also thinking about technical language, showing that I'm an expert. Protein, food chain, vaccines, medication. Okay, it's all technical vocabulary. Right, we're going to carry on then. So far we can see in our balanced argument shapes that we've gone through the introduction, we've taken our reader and we've pushed them through the for argument, and now we're finding ourselves at the point where we are going to talk about against. Now, I've already crossed out some of the conjunctions and debate language that I've already used because I don't want to repeat myself. There are lots of other words and phrases there that I can use instead. So I'm going to make sure that I've got a nice selection, a variety of different phrases and conjunctions that I've used throughout. So here's my reader. I can see that he's coming up to the against argument. Now, with this against argument, we've got to argue against the points that we've already made. Now, the points that we've already made are that meat is useful, it's a good source of protein, and that we need animals for medical testing, for medical research. So the against arguments have got to be against using animals as food, and against using animals for medical reasons. So I can't change that. So I chose those two right at the start. You may have chose some different points to argue, and that's absolutely fine. So I've had a look at my contrasting conjunctions, and I've had a look, and I've decided to go with in contrast, because in contrast means on the opposite side. You could say on the other hand, or in opposition to this. And I'm thinking about vegetarians. Vegetarians think very strongly and would suggest that we can get all the protein we need from different sources. Okay, so they are suggesting that a diet which is free of meat, a meat-free diet, is just as healthy as one that's rich in meat, that's heavier meat, that has lots of meat, a meat-rich diet. So I'm going to put that idea into a sentence. So in contrast, comma, that's my fronted adverbial. Vegetarians would suggest a meat-free diet can be just as healthy as a meat-rich one. And I'm going to say that I've had to do a little bit of research here. I've had to spend some time looking at what other foods give us protein, and I found there was a few. So I found there was grains and pulses, there were dairy products which vegetarians wouldn't use because they're still from animals. I've got grains and pulses, I've got nuts, and I've also got from meat substitutes, so things like soya and tofu. Now, because I've got a list, and thinking back to my work earlier in year 4, I know that I can use a colon here to introduce the list and then put all my items in a list. I know that commas and ands never go together. So when I'm formulating this part of the sentence, I'm thinking about all that grammar. With necessary protein coming from, colon, grains and pulses, comma, nuts and meat substitutes, full stop. I'm going to add on now. I'm going to use one of these adding on phrases, and I've chosen additionally. And I'm going to now talk about the welfare of animals and you know, the need that they should be treated with respect and be treated like humans. You know, why should we use those for medical research? You know, that's not fair. They have a right, as we do, to a safe life and a healthy, wonderful life like we do. So I'm going to add on here. So I'm using additionally this adverb. I've got my ly at the end and I've got my comma. Additionally, many people argue that animals should be, and I'm going to talk about animals being treated like humans. You know, they should be equal to us. They're equally as important in our ecosystem. So I'm going to try and formulate that in my mind. and I've had lots and lots of practice. So I've done lots of writing down and scribbling out. And you know that if you're in my class, I always show you what I've done before, because writers never get it right first time. Okay, it's okay to write it and think, no, I've got a better word than that. All right, so I've decided with, additionally, many people argue that animals should be treated equally, as they have just as much of a right to live as humans have. Okay, so I've done my against argument. It's finished. So I've used in contrast. This is an opposing view. I've added on my extra bit of research, my extra point. Okay, I've used some technical words again here. I've used vegetarians. I've put protein in again. Substitutes. So that means things that can replace meat. I've gone with many people argue. I've used some debate language here. Okay. And I've done my against. So I'm going to continue now, and I'm going to push my reader through to the very last bit, which is the conclusion. Fantastic. So we've come to the end of our balanced discussion. So we've written our introduction, we've written our paragraph to say why we're for it, we've written our paragraph to say why we're against it. Now what we need to do is we need to draw all that together. So this final paragraph, the conclusion, is a little bit different, okay? It concludes the argument, it brings it together, it draws together the points, and we're going to put forward our own opinion on it. Okay, now if we're using our own opinion, we are going to have to write in the first person. So we're writing with pronouns like I, me, and my. We are thinking about drawing everything together. So we're not going to put any new points in here. We're going to use everything that's come before us in the argument, in the for and the against. And we're just going to draw it together and say what we think. Okay, and then we might have had an idea at the start, or your reader might have had an idea at the start, but when we've pushed them through the text, when they've read what you have written, they might have changed their idea by the end of the text. We've got to make sure though that it is balanced, okay, so that we're not being biased, we're not giving, we're not leaning more towards one side than the other, okay, so that's really important. So, in conclusion, there are strong arguments for and against killing animals. Okay, and I want to say that, we understand that destroying animals isn't very nice, but if we look after them and we treat them with respect, while we're having to slaughter them for food or use them for medical reasons, then surely that's okay, isn't it? But if we're not being kind, if we're not respecting them, if we're keeping them in terrible conditions, or if we're not looking after them properly, or if the farmers aren't giving them the right food, or if the scientists are being unkind to them, then that isn't right. All right. So in conclusion, there are strong arguments for and against killing animals. If the welfare of the animals is taken into account by farmers and scientists, then destroying them for meat and medical reasons is surely justified. It's okay. But on the other side of that, if we don't do all those things, then it's not okay. So I'm going to use however here to say however. And it might be that this isn't always done, okay? So that's my sentence. I'm going to say, if we looked after the welfare, then that's all justified. However, this may not always be the case. So this may not always be true. For some animals, or with some animals. With some animals suffering unnecessarily. I've decided actually that I've used unnecessarily quite a few times in this bit of writing, and I think I want to go back and in the editing process where I look at my grammar and my punctuation and my spelling, I want to maybe try and change that word. Can I think of a synonym? Can I think of a different word that means the same, that's just as powerful, but that I can use instead? This is where I'm giving my opinion. Okay, so I'm using this sentence stem that I've got here in blue. So from the points above, I think that, and that's where you're going to give your opinion. Now remember, I said that, although I've used the food and the medical research as my 2 points, there were lots of other reasons that we came up with, or that you may have talked about with your parents, for killing animals. And some of those were for sport, some of those were to do with poaching for fur and tusks and parts of animals. So because I've chosen to model these 2 points, you don't need to do that. And I would really like to see you doing something different to me, so that you can show me your writing and show me that you've used all the skills and you've really thought about putting it together so it's coherent and it flows nicely. I'm really looking forward to reading your discussion texts, making sure that they're balanced. So make sure you send them to me, Miss O'Donnell and Miss Parker on the Year 4 Google Drive.